Okay, the biggest challenge for me tonight is to handle the control. And Finn's always given me instructions, in-depth instructions before we begin. So we're going to talk about the fueling the brain, and we're going to see how many times we can use juicy. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about balancing sugar, and this is the little bit of the menu. But let's start with this. Food is information. The foods that we eat speaks to our genes. This is a really important part of this. So anytime you eat something that's not so great, think about how it speaks to the genes. So think about this. This is the amount of food that we eat in a lifetime. We eat 25 tons. Some of us eat a little bit more. And each one of these elephants are about 8 tons. So we eat about 3 of those in a lifetime. Remember, food speaks to our genes. So if we're eating 3 tons or 3 elephants amount of food, what is speaking to our genes of that proportion, right? So consider this. We eat 156 pounds of added sugar per year, 31 5-pounds, or about 50 teaspoons, or half a pound in a day. That's a lot of sugar, right? Speaks to the genes. We also eat 134 pounds of flour. When I first looked at this, I had to go and haul out the 5-pound bag of flour to see exactly how much that is. We eat 29 pounds of French fries and 23 pounds of pizza. Incidentally, we'll probably be eating a lot more of that flour next week, right? Thanksgiving, that kind of thing. This is where we're going to get into that part. So that, again, remember, speaks to the genes. The issue about all these things is, what is it actually doing to the body? What is it doing to the system? And the first place that we're going to look at from a health point of view is blood sugar and insulin control. So the more of those refined carbohydrates we eat, the sugary things, the flour, the pizza, the fries, the cookies, the cakes, all of those high glycemic food loads, it's going to increase the blood sugar. And insulin's job is to pick up that glucose and pack it away. So let's take an example of one of these cereals. And I bring that up because I've had 2 patients today tell me that they eat, one eats Fruit Loops and the other one had Honey Bunches of Oats. So starting the day off with something like that, that's going to raise the blood sugar, right? Lots of sugar in there, first thing in the morning, not such a great thing to do. Not juicy. So, the thing about that blood sugar, it raises, we eat that, and it floods the bloodstream, and now we have a lot of insulin that picks up that glucose, packs it away. Now, if this happens over time, days, weeks, months, years, we end up having a little bit of a problem with that whole insulin blood sugar mechanism in the body. So now we end up with lots more insulin, and the problem, ladies and gentlemen, with insulin, necessary hormone that it is, it also promotes inflammation. And inflammation is probably one of the things that we want to try and control. And the problem with this, too much of the insulin, is that we end up with the system that's not working, kind of like my little pointer, the system that's not working, and we end up with more insulin, which ends up with insulin resistance, and or prediabetes. Insulin resistance is a bit of an issue. And that is linked with all the diseases that we know. So heart disease, diabetes, cancer, depression, arthritis, Alzheimer's, mood disorders, all of those issues are related with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, or even before we get to type 2 diabetes. So controlling blood sugar and insulin is probably one of the most important things that we need to do. So, moving on to this thing here. Here's a whole bunch of studies if you're interested in that. What's interesting about this one is that we look at type 3 diabetes, insulin, and how it affects the brain. Moving on to the next slide. What do we need to do to control blood sugar? Protein, fat, and fiber. Those 3 foods have a major impact on how we control the blood sugar. So increasing that in the diet is probably where we want to go. And we'll talk more about this as we get through the PowerPoint. The brain on grains, there's lots of information around this. The whole thing around gluten gets to be problematic around the brain. We know that it promotes inflammation throughout the body, and we know that there's a correlation with some of the brain factors too. We know that patients, when they're eating grains, or when I've seen patients, will talk to me about brain fog, fatigue, headaches, unable to focus. We take the grains out of the diet, and we can see a complete change with lots and lots of patients. Come back to that. So the main foods that we're going to be talking about is fat. The human brain is nearly 70% of fat. So consider this. We're walking around with this very fatty head, right? That's juicy. So the fats and oils we put in our mouths shapes the brain's fatty architecture from the moment we're born right through to old age. So the more fat is probably better than less fat. And lots of data around that now. So here we have the whole thing around omega-6s and omega-3s. Everyone know about that? Okay, good. So omega-6, the pathway for this happens in most of the cell membranes, almost every cell membrane of the body. Omega-6 moves down this very long chain, and it promotes inflammation. Omega-3s, on the other hand, moves down this, and it is anti-inflammatory. And in the body, we always want a balance between inflammation and anti-inflammation. That's what the body is always about. It's always sourcing balance. So we want to have this balanced. And we want to see this in the form of a 1-to-1 ratio, or even a 5-to-1 ratio would be fine. But what we see in the diets today is much more of the omega-6s, so a little imbalanced, I would say, compared to the omega-3s, which is anti-inflammatory. So we want to start looking at how we can reduce the inflammatory process in the body, and there are lots of foods that do that. And we can start looking at how much of the omega-3s we can eat. So when we look at foods, we can look at this ratio. If you look at grass-fed or free-range beef, and you compare that to corn-fed beef, look at this ratio, 1-to-1 or 3-to-1. If you look at just corn-fed beef, it's a 10-to-1, 20-to-1. So that's fairly inflammatory, right? Let's look at commercial eggs, 17-to-1, or here 1.75-to-1. Look at game, 3-to-1. And even if you have a look at look at dairy. In fact, if you have organic dairy, you have a little bit more of the omega-3s in dairy. So there's a reduction of the inflammatory process there. So if you had to eat a meal that was corn fat, beef, maybe with some eggs on top of that, maybe with a little bit of corn oil salad dressing in an iceberg lettuce. Not juicy. This is inflammation. And it's interesting because that inflammation can continue for about 12 hours after you've consumed that meal. So the healthy fats are avocados, fish, nuts and seeds, nut butter, organic, yummy, delicious butter. And then there's ghee. Love ghee. Makes everything taste absolutely delicious. And then the other oils are olive oil, of course, flaxseed, which you'd never cook with, coconut oil, coconut butter, coconut milk. And then the nut oils are also good. So walnut, hazelnut, macadamias, and now we're even looking at avocados and nut oil. So these are really good for the brain. Remember, the brain is 70% fat. So the more of those we eat, the more supportive that will make the brain. These are not so healthy. I can't believe it's not butter. This is definitely not juicy. Peanut oils, this is canola oil, corn oil, margarines. These are probably the oils that we want to throw out. If you have this in your kitchen, dump it. Go back to the healthier ones, the butter. And this is a super, super, super food. This is brain food. And it makes you feel great. But for heaven's sake, have that yolk. because the yolk and the egg white together makes a complete food. And this is where you're going to get complete protein in it. And the issue with eggs and cholesterol is not something that's true. There is no connection with that. Lots of studies around that. So eat the whole egg, including the yolk. When I first came to this country and I saw egg whites on the menu, I wondered what was going on. Because to me, the egg white is probably the not so groovy part of the egg. The egg yolk is juicy. Doing well, Molly, with the juicy, huh? Okay, so cholesterol, and everybody says to me, eggs, egg yolks, cholesterol. Come on, Sharon, what's all that about? We need it. The brain needs it. We need it for the myelin sheath. We need it for the brains, keep the brain membrane stable. We need it in every single cell. It's vital for all our stress and our sex hormones. We need it as a precursor to vitamin D. It's needed for serotonin. That's the neurotransmitter that calms us down. We need it for how we digest fat. And the brain contains 25% of our total cholesterol. Fat and cholesterol in the brain. And actually, some of the studies now show that low total cholesterol is linked with depression, immune behavior, suicide, and violence. So we probably want to be eating a little bit more of that butter. Okay. So here are the three main food groups: vegetables, vegetables, and vegetables. If you've been to my talks, you will know vegetables is really a great point and that's something we always want to talk about. And the reason for them being so important, besides the vitamins and the antioxidants and all those great things and the fiber, it has phytochemicals in it. And phytochemicals are the things that give the vegetables color and a lot of nutrients. They're important because they are huge as a health component of plants. They protect the plant from pests and environmental stresses. So we need those because it helps us too. It boosts the immune system. It's good for the heart. It's good for the liver. It's good for cell signaling. It's good for DNA support. Those phytochemicals are the things that we want to be having. The more color in your diet, the more phytochemicals. Those blueberries, anthocyanins. Eggplant, anthocyanins. I say that with reverence. The purple in the cauliflower, anthocyanins. These are things that the body needs. So the more vegetables we have, the more color. Throw in a little bit of butter. Throw in lots of garlic. And it's juicy. Okay. The issue that we have here is we're a little deficient in these phytonutrients. So 69% of us are not getting enough of the greens. 78, not so much of the red. 86, we fall short in the white. 88%, purple and blue, anthocyanins. 79% fall short of the yellow and the orange. And they say that 8 out of 10 of us are definitely very below that phytonutrient gap, which means that it has an impact on so many different aspects of the body, including our genes and the support of the DNA. So these are another part of phytochemicals, spices. Those spices in there have a huge, profound effect on the body. Probably one of the most studied spice for every single cell and system in the body has got to be turmeric. The phytochemical in turmeric is curcumin. It's the yellow stuff that stains everything. But black pepper, curry, fennel, marjoram, pomegranates, and pomegranates are in season. Sage, saffron, all of these things. Oh, and sage and the turkey. So we've got a lot of things for next week, right? Anxiety, lemongrass, mint, nutmeg, rosemary, saffron. Now I see that supplements have come out with lots of saffron in it for helping with anxiety. That's a very expensive thing because saffron is an expensive spice. And again, we're looking at sage. Stuff that turkey with sage. Black pepper, rosemary, saffron. So when we're using all these delicious aromatic spices and we're adding a little bit of herbs to it, this is really juicy stuff. So moving on to bunches of studies, brains, berries, 2013, green tea, huge for protecting the body. If you don't like a cup of green tea, Cook your rice, add some to stews, add them to casseroles. And cocoa, chocolate. Everybody loves chocolate. Make sure that your chocolate is, everything's over 73% or 70% cacao, because that's the phytochemical in it, and that's the thing that benefits the body. The milk chocolate with lots of sugar in it is probably not such a great thing. Turmeric, again, here's all the studies around turmeric. There's more studies around turmeric than I have seen in any other ingredient for some time. So in the news lately, we're looking at this whole debate, cholesterol. This thing was, I think it was in 1950, no, it must have been about 1965, the whole thing around cholesterol in the egg. And this was around about June of this year. The great thing about my job and the work that I do and the stuff that I'm so passionate about, which is nutrition, it's forever changing. So now we look at this. This is just in the last 6 months, looking at how important fat is and how important some of that saturated fat is for the body. So if you want to go back, have a look at all these studies. This is a really nice little one in the New York Times. And again, studies. So we are increasingly challenging our physiology with ingredients for which we are not genetically prepared. The body doesn't know what to do with this stuff. This is pink, there's all kinds of stuff in there. But look at the difference between walnuts and the brain. It's similar, right? And there's a great study that came out 2 weeks ago about walnuts and the brain. Interesting. So, here are a bunch of supplements. Omega-3s, the DHA is the part of the fish oil that is very, very important for the brain. Vitamin D3 is huge. We really want to be looking at the levels of your vitamin D3. Check that out with your docs. Anytime you're having some labs, check your levels of D3, because the quantity depends on the level that your labs come up with. Coconut oil. Coconut oil is huge. We've seen lots of great studies. In fact, even 1 teaspoon of coconut oil is not a bad thing for the brain. Remember, the brain's 70% fat, 25% cholesterol. Turmeric, lipoic acid, probiotics, all of these things are great. However, we need to do individualized plans because your genes are unique to you. No one shares them on this planet. So what your supplements need, what you need in a supplement plan is going to be very different to your neighbors. And that's where we can help you with that. There's a product I like to use called Brain Sustain, but we can talk about that when you come for an appointment. Okay, here's the takeaway, ladies and gentlemen. Eggs, fats and oils, berries, avocados, fish and shellfish, coconut oil, butter and ghee, vegetables, spice. These are things we want to include in our diet. Chocolate, yes. Vegetables, coffees and teas, nuts and seeds, vegetables, protein, and we can hold the starches and the sugar for sure. And then more vegetables. That will make a very juicy menu. Thank you.